performer, acting, like that's sometimes where I draw like a feeling from, because it's like I've never experienced that feeling in my life, but I remember how I think I felt the other person feel in that moment. And so I just dig into that. Like, what happens if I was literally experiencing that? What happens if I was experiencing that through this character? This character is literally experiencing that. Let's dig into it. Like, what are the compounding factors? And then, like, just going there, getting dark, getting deep. And, like, it's been a lot of work. Like, a lot of things, the way that you see who I am today is a shit ton of work. I never feel like I'm ever put on idle. Like, I don't just, like, I don't have an idle switch. I'm just like, oh, yeah, whatever. It's cruise, baby.
Hey, welcome to Humans and Magic. My guest this week is Michael Sinclair II. Michael is a tabletop RPG performer, voice actor, and Magic content creator. We had a lot of fun. Please enjoy. All right. Michael Sinclair II, thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I've been excited waiting for this opportunity, so I'm excited. I love your stuff, love your interview style. I'm stoked.
Hey, thank you for listening. I know you've been also public about just listening on a few episodes. It's always nice to have a listener, because half of the time people coming into this have no idea what they're in for. So there's just like, I'm going to be here to just talk about magic, right? And then the look of recognition they have when they realize that it was kind of like, that might not be the case.
No.
Then they're kind of like, what's going on?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I just enjoy content, and so sometimes something will pique my interest, and I'll look into it. And I took a journalism class, best like college class I've taken, even though I'm a computer science major. And like the way your methodology of like interviewing people is just very, very clean, concise, crisp, crunchy, if you will. And I'm about it.
I love being called crunchy. That's the first time I've been called crunchy, so I love it.
There you go. Yeah.
What's the best thing you learned from the journalism course?
How to be inquisitive. Like, a lot of the stuff is like misinformation stuff nowadays, and it teaches you to kind of look at their sources, look at, anyone who's like kind of co-signed with good, reputation, and also who's their target audience, what is their purpose of doing this? Is there any sort of gain, financial clout, notoriety, XYZ, like what, those type of things. And through there, usually you can break down further if this is like a good article or good information. So I'd say that's probably the best thing I've learned, and it's been super helpful. And it also helps you to learn how to learn too. It's one of those things where it's like one of the better classes to help you when you don't know what you don't know. It kind of helps you kind of at least scratch the surface and then start digging deeper. So I would say that.
Yeah. No, that's great to have that awareness. And do you have any aspirations to be I know you said you're studying computer science right now, but are you going to become a computer scientist,
Probably
journalist?
not.
Or probably not
a computer scientist, but I would probably be closer to being a journalist, even though I'm a computer science major. I don't know what I'm going to do, honestly, after college. But I'm glad to learn the logic and the philosophy of computer science. And I love like digging into topics and like social justice stuff. So those things always make me happy. So I have no clue. I'm just kind of leaving it open.
Yeah. Tell me about your major now. I mean, you mentioned, we were talking before, and you mentioned that you're a junior, right? So you're kind of over halfway to the finish line there.
I've been a junior for like 4 years. I don't know. Yeah, so I'm halfway into my degree. Computer science is a very hard discipline. The learning environment and academia of computer science is very bad, horrendous, terrible. Don't let anyone tell you different. It's very much like you're not going to class to learn. You're kind of going to class to measure your bits. I'll just be like PG about it. Like everyone, it's a bits measuring contest. Like
how big is your bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you ever ask a question, people are like looking at you like you're the worst being on planet Earth, and you're like, I thought we were here to learn. This is strange. So, yeah, the experience has just been like, it's kind of like going into a magic tournament, and it's a magic tournament for like a week every day, and you're just like slogging through, and you're just trying to make it and understand the cards and understand the stack every time, and then people are looking at you and being toxic AF while you're doing it, and you're like, I don't understand, I just want to learn, I like this stuff, please stop being so rude. And that's how I explain computer science. I can't wait for people to flame me in mentions, but that's the god honest truth for me.
I fully sympathize with that. So I study computer science as my degree, like
okay.
a long time ago.
I'm just
and it
blaming
sounds like it has not changed that much, if I'm being honest. Like, yeah. The only thing is now is that you're older and wiser, so you kind of see past kind of the bullshit of academia. Right, but then the problem is that no one else has yet, or maybe they're younger and they haven't figured it out yet, or maybe they're just oblivious and it doesn't matter what their age is, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's like you even see older folks doing that. I'm like, what is going? Why are you guys drinking the Kool-Aid? Like this is not okay. And it's not like a specific college or university. I've been to like 3 or 4, and they all are just like trashed here at trying to teach this.
Oh man, yeah, it's like an ego thing, I think, for a lot of people. I honestly think it is. It's not like they're being super obtuse or oblivious. It's just, or maybe they are, but it's like they sort of feed off of being sort of superior intellectually, or feeling like smug or smarter than other people. Like, unfortunately, that's how it is sometimes, you know.
I'm just like, this is one of the hardest disciplines, and it's a very communal discipline. It's supposed to be like some of the people who do so amazing have done things because they worked as a team or worked as a group or worked as a community or looked on the internet and like tried to get help from someone else. Like, but then in academia, in practice in academia, it's like you're isolated, you're alone, you can't reference anything. It should be from your brain. And like, if you don't know anything, get the hell out of here. And you're like, why?
Yeah.
That's my 2 bits on computer science.
I have to give one more bit, and then this is a question for you. I still remember back in the day when I took computer science, you actually had to memorize a lot of shit. Like, even for exams, you had to pretend that the internet didn't exist, and you had to remember like things that you could easily just Google anytime in the real world. So do you still have that in your exams? And assignments?
Like paper and pencil shit, where you're just like, here's a paper and pencil. You don't get access to your notes. Try and build like, you know, I don't know, what's some sort of sorting out, like a Dijkstra algorithm on paper.
Right.
And you're like, you know, to sort out people's last names and money and all this stuff. And you're like, what? Like, this took me 4 days on assignment, like for 8 hours each day, and now you want me to reproduce this like on a piece of paper and pencil? Like, what?
Okay, yeah, sounds like you're not having that much fun. But I just to very clumsily switch gears, because I feel like I could talk about computer science forever.
Oh yeah, we could flame this forever.
This is the anti-computer science podcast.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah. You also recently moved, right? Is that because of school or because of other stuff? Hopefully, first of all, are you getting settled in all right at your current location? You're on the West Coast now, right?
Yeah, Pacific Northwest is the best. Straight up, no one can contest that. I will straight
Shout
up
out Pacific Northwest.
Hell yeah. Yeah, because it used to be in Vancouver, I think.
Exactly,
point, right?
exactly. I grew up very close to Seattle, so yeah.
So you know. I'm settling in super well. Places like decked out, not decked out, but it is very homey. It's very happy, cozy. I didn't want anything to scream bachelor pad, although right now you're only seeing this. There's supposed to be a couch delivered here soon, but everything is very full, and I have plants, and I have, you know, nice kitchen. I can cook. I cook my meals. Like, everything is super nice. So, I've been settling very well, and just happy to kind of have my own space and call it my own. It's great.
Very nice. How's your cooking game? Are you very good with the culinary stuff?
I would say I'm a pretty decent home chef. I can get around most recipes as long as I have the stuff to do the recipe. I'm generally pretty good. I think I've only messed up one recipe, but I think the recipe was wrong, and it was aloo gobi, which is like an Indian dish, and I messed that up, and that's the only one I've like actually burnt, and it was like, oh, there's not salvageable, and that was just recently. But generally, I'm a pretty good cook, so yeah, I take pride in kind of being able to chef stuff up. I've taken like some sort of cooking thing here or there growing up, so it's all kind of gotten to a place where it's good. And obviously, like, cooking shows and YouTube and stuff exist, so I just pay attention.
Yeah, man, God bless YouTube. There's just you can learn anything, including how to edit videos and podcasts and talk to people. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so what's the main reason for your move? Is it because of school or because of other stuff going on in your life?
So I just got out of a long-term relationship, and so I had a community here before we moved. The reason why we moved to Denver, Colorado, this is where I was before, was that my significant other they graduated PA school, and they're very smart. They're like brilliant. She got the top of her class in the MEDEX program here in like, the UW MEDEX program out of all 4 campuses, and then went to her dream job, which is PA, being a PA in the ER. Yeah.
Sorry, what does PA stand for?
Physician assistant, which ironically is kind of a job based off my former job in the military at corpsmen. So the PAs were created because corpsmen coming back from, I think, Vietnam or some other older war couldn't come back and practice all these skills that we've honed and learned in the military. It's like you have all these skills and all these abilities and certifications and qualifications, and then when you come back to the main world, it's like, well, you're literally nothing. So they create a PA school thing for a pipeline for people who had my training to go into PA school and then come out the other side of being a PA, being able to work under a doctor. So that's what PA is.
Okay, so how long were you in Denver?
10 months about. And then I had to make a decision that was kind of like, it was a decision more of, I guess you could say self-preservation, to put it lightly, of like, well, I can be here or I can go back and be in a better place, to, for lack of better words, and to kind of keep it brief and concise. But and I already had built a community here and kept in touch with people here, and at some point I was like, okay, I think I need to go back to where I have an established community and I feel good and I love the Pacific Northwest, and I think it's a healthy place for me to kind of reassess, kind of get myself together, kind of figure out where I want to go from here, and like what my wants and needs, and kind of focus more inward, I guess, where a lot of, I feel like I was focusing more outward a lot. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's tough. It's tough always in one's life journey to figure that out. But how long were you in the Pacific Northwest before moving back here?
How long was I in the Pacific Northwest before?
Yes. How long were you
here?
How long were you here? Like previous, right? Because you had built up a community here, you mentioned, and
right. Yeah. I think 2019 July to December 2021.
Okay, so
I want
it's
to
a good
say it was
2-3
that
years.
Long.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact year, date, months on that, but yeah.
Is it Seattle or is it another part of
Spokane, Washington? So I'm out of Spokane, Washington. I did live in Bremerton, which is in the Puget Sound area. I forget how to pronounce that correctly, but
yeah, Puget Sound sounds right.
Puget Sound, yeah. So I was there when I was still in the military, and I think that was like, I know I was there for probably about 2 years. 2 years. I also deployed out of there. So that's when I first fell in love with the Pacific Northwest, is when I lived out of Bremerton area for 2 years. So I guess collectively I've probably been around here 4.5 to 5 years, somewhere, give or take. Yeah.
What's your favorite part of the Pacific Northwest? Is it the surroundings, the people, combination, or something else?
Yeah, it's like, oh man, it's the combination of all these things, all these aspects. Like the trees are just like, I've lived in deserts, I've lived in jungle, I've lived in so many places where like you get 2 seasons, and Pacific Northwest has all 4. And I like being so close to like cold ocean, and I like the trees, and I like like people complain on west side of the state, like Seattle, about the rain and the haze and all that. I'm like, I love that stuff, because like you can never get too hot. You can never, get fatigued in the sense of like being hot or overwhelmed in some aspects. Like, yeah, you can get cold, but like usually if I'm outdoors doing things, like I'm grinding, or I'm like hiking, or I'm running, or I'm working out to the extent where like I'm producing steam. Like I'm just a generally hot person. So it's like, well, this is great. I could just go forever in this stuff. And I know a lot of people, like, it really affects their mood, where I'm kind of opposite. When it rains, when it's like, the worse it is outside in a weird mood, like the happier I am in some senses. Not like apocalyptic. Like that's a problem if like things are actually bad happening. Like I'm not, wild and chaotic like that. But if it's like, within sustainable reason of like however bad the weather is, like terribly, I'm like the happier I get in a weird way. So, yeah, and that's one of the things that like really attracts me to Pacific Northwest. And I love the people, and like Washington State, I don't know if it still holds this, but like the combination of factors like social factors, factors of like mobility and like people being taken care of as a general thing, like and education and all that stuff. The overall score is #1 in the United States. I don't know if that's changed recently, but like if you get all the important state factors, like Washington's like #1. So, we're just #1. So I guess that's why it's, it's great.
I mean, I'm not American, but I always felt like if there's one state I would actually move to, it would be Washington State. Just by virtue of just all those things you mentioned. And I'm really an outdoors person as well. I enjoy going on runs and things like that. And like, I just can't be in a place where it's too hot. Like, I can't see myself moving to Austin, Texas, where I hear it's like regularly, 100, right? It's like over 100. And it's just like, my body just shuts down. when I want to exercise, my body just shuts down when it's like 100. Like when it's like just slightly below that, I'm like, great, I can run like 10 miles, like even like 20 miles. But it's like, above a certain point, my body just says, no, James, I'm not doing this today. And I just start walking. So
no, I'm pretty resilient, actually. I think I've just built
You must be, man. You must be because of your background. Like you, maybe we could talk about that. Like you were in the Navy, right? You were in the Navy proper for a long time, right?
Yeah, I was in the Navy for 8 years. The majority of that I was a Navy corpsman, so that's like a Navy medic, which normally we could work blue side, which is like with the Navy side is what we say, and then you can work green side, which means like you attach onto Marine units, and basically just do almost everything Marines do. Some Marines might contest that. Some other wiser Marines might be like, no, that's about right, except you do a little bit extra, and some
This
not
is
so
like
much.
the military version of gatekeeping, right? This is like,
yeah.
Like, you're not here, you're this, you're not that.
Yeah. But like some of the cool ones, like they know that sometimes like some corpsmen will overperform some Marines. Like that's just, and then there's some corpsmen who are just dirtbags and don't do anything. So it really is just.
It sounds like every industry. There's good and bad people, right?
Yeah. So no, that was my military experience. Was just being able to do all that stuff, and like the biggest thing, the sexiest, coolest thing that like people just want to know is just like, and you just give it to them because like you just like, here's the answer you want, go away. But not you. You can ask questions. But like the last platoon I really served with was a sniper platoon, and that was really fun and cool, and I got to learn a lot, and like. I don't know. It was just a really great experience. So, yeah.
Okay. So, at what age did you enter the Navy?
19 years old. I was 19.
So from 19 to around 27, you were in service. Okay.
2009 to 2017.
How did it shape you as a man or as a person?
Oh, this is a great question. I think it gave me a lot of focus, and it made me. Let me think. It gave me parameters to be able to be successful. Like it gave me a container or something to be successful, because I think without joining the military, I really wouldn't know what to do with myself. I have like ADHD. I mean, who kind of doesn't, but I've been diagnosed, and like kind of the structure of it was helpful because I can only get so far, do so many things within the confined place of where they order you to be or do, or whatever that case is. And so through that, because it gave me structure, I was able to kind of emulate that in my real life. Not take all of the toxic, bad, terrible stuff, but like some of that stuff is carried on in a good way. Mm-hmm. And then for like, it's good. And a lot of people like go into the military trying to, not just because of the opportunity it gives them, but I feel like a majority go in because they're there to prove something, right? Like you're there to be like
chip on their shoulder kind of thing. Yeah,
like for me, it was just like I was kind of a scaredy boy growing up, and like I was like, maybe the military will teach me how to give me more courage, or like not be such a scaredy cat in some ways, and which is true. And then like, you get pushed to your boundaries and stuff like that, and you figure out, who you are in some ways. And it also helped in like what masculinity was. It taught me what masculinity was for myself. Like, you see lots of emulations of toxic masculinity in the military, and you're like, yikes, not that. And then there's other times where you see like positive stuff, and so like trying to cling on to that or define what it was for me. And then especially when I got out and reflecting upon all those things, I kind of figured out like, okay, what are the important parts of masculinity to me that I want to keep, and what are the really toxic stuff I need to leave behind. And so I think it was good in both those ways.
So it sounds like you really grew up as a person during that. Like it was your adulthood, right? It coincided with becoming an adult, basically.
Yeah, in some ways. I think it was like adulthood 0.5. Like it gets you halfway through to adulthood. And this was like a big thing when I was getting out. I saw a lot of my very successful peers, like people who had high accolades and awards and just like were the go-getters and like superstars. And then they get out and they would crash and burn or be depressed or like, and these are things that affect veterans. And I was like, what is going on here? Why, these are people who've done so well, who are like, who perform above and beyond where I am. And like, where's the fall off? Because if they're the performing superstars and I'm getting out, what is that? Where do I fall?
Right.
And so I started trying to figure out where the gap was. And a lot of it was just like being able to connect with civilians and being able to connect with just common people and what their problems are, what societal problems are, like all these things, which compounded into many other aspects of me learning about social justice stuff and marginalized people and what that means and where I find myself, my place in all that. But the original point was it helped me become successful because, it was 0.5 to adulthood because it gave me a lot of the tools I would need to survive being an adult. But I think like right now, I feel like I'm somewhat entering a second adulthood of, all right, you got most of like the objective things you need to handle for adulthood, but you don't have like some of the subjective, emotional, like self-care things as an adult, which I have all the tools. I know all the knowledge from other things that I've done in my life, but I've never had to put them in practice solo dolo for myself. And so like right now it feels like the second adulthood.
I get you. Because I think that complex just gives you one set of tools, right? It gives you maybe more the, for lack of a better term, like the masculinity or like physical fitness or discipline. But then those are not necessarily all the things that you need to be a fully functioning adult, right? Which is kind of what you're alluding to. Correct.
Yep, exactly. So, it gives you all those, like the objective hard skills that you kind of need to be successful. But, some of those soft skills will be the ones that like kind of end you or like be the downfall if you don't learn how to do those things or adapt or connect with other people. And so, and what that means for yourself. So that's why I would say like, and that's where that's the gap I noticed when I saw like some of my peers, hit big declines, and not be successul. And like, of course I want them to be successful, but like those are things that I noticed. And I was like, okay, I've identified the vulnerability. Now what do I do? Now it's time to get to work and whatever that means and like try to dig deeper each time. And then, through that, it opened up so many doors and avenues for me for like knowledge and self-knowledge and all that stuff. So
was there a particular point or points in time where you kind of realized that after getting out of the Navy, like, hey, I need to work on myself. I need to work on these kinds of things. I may not have the tool set for it, but just having the awareness that you needed to have to work on it. Because I feel like some people just get caught up in never coming to that awareness or realization, whereas it feels like you have. So was there like particular turning points in your life where that happened? Or
this was really, like I said, like I just noticed a discrepancy. I was getting out, it was like a year out before I was getting out of the military, and I was like, I don't want to fail. Like, this is the scariest, getting out is one of the scariest things ever, because like there goes your support structure,
you're leaving that bubble, right? Yeah.
Right. It's a safety net in some ways. So like, in a lot of ways, it's a safety net. So you like, everyone's super excited, like, I'm never going to be told what to do again. I don't have to be here for this person. I don't have to listen to this person. But also it's like, well, you always have a roof over your head. You always get fed. You always have clothing. You always have, all these things. And, when you're getting out, that's when I realized I was like, this is kind of scary. Like there's that little thing that like creeped in within my chest, that little like fuzzy, like bad, terrible feeling that you get. And I was just like, that doesn't feel great. I need to start figuring things out. And so, yeah, it was that kind of sensation. And I think, I was able to, at the time I was polyamorous at the time. And I'm going back into that currently, but, I had a partner at the time who was getting more into. I don't know what's allowed to be taught or said in your podcast.
You can say anything. You can use. You can. There's. It's told. There's no. There are no limits. There are no.
Sure. Okay, so I was getting into the kink and BDSM sex positivity scene in Los Angeles, and I was in those communities for maybe a year or two or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I got to learn a lot. It was like kind of like a fast track of like. Not just about the you know, the sexy fun side of things, but like really the knowledge about social justice issues and how it affects marginalized folks, because like somehow those things are interconnected, of like the privilege of people who get to be in these spaces, of like the sex positive spaces, the BDSM kink spaces, and like because of that, like there was always like workshops of like, you know, how to engage in these communities while being like POC or LGBTQIA plus, or you know, or a lot of these people were trying to figure out their identities or themselves, and, you know, had a hard time trying to explore those out in, you know, PvP society, where like, that's all I'll say, I don't know. But then you can go to these like workshops, these classes, these like, you know, safe space, quote unquote, where you can just learn and feel comfortable trying to explore things. And they call it safe space. It's like kind of bullshit, but like, you have this safe space to explore scary things, to explore things that are, you know, not so easy to kind of peel back the layers on. And so, because I was exposed to that through all these people doing those things, that was like a majority where all the work happened. It wasn't like, yeah, the BDSM kink sex positive stuff is fun and you get to kind of participate in some of those things. Mm-hmm. But like, honestly, the real work was just figuring out how it pertained to, you know, marginalized folks, or people who are like kind of closeted, or people who couldn't be their true selves within society, and how society kind of contains that, or disincentivizes it, or like can make, or violence can happen to those people. And so from that, I started connecting, softening up, starting to relate what's important to people outside of the military. And from those things, I think that's where like I hit like an adulthood 0.75, where I'm like, okay, these are the 3/4. So like, these are the things that's really important for people. This is how I relate to someone. That's how I connect to other people. Like, no one really cares I wasn't part of the military. Like, some people do, but like, that's not going to connect me with someone who I care about or think is cool outside the military. Like, these are the things that are going to connect me. And so that's long answer to what you were just asking, was those things.
No, that's interesting. So how does one even get into such a community? Like, because I've never had experience being in a community like this, so it's not like, you know, I'm in the Magic community, but that's just like, you know, I go to the LGS. How do you get into the LGBTQ BDSM kink community? Like, were you on forums, and is there like a site for this, or like, how does it work?
Yeah. So there's a couple of websites.
Some I might have bookmarked. Yeah.
You know, we don't, James, hold on. Okay. I see you interviewing style. No, I was kidding. There's some of the stuff I don't use I don't use anymore, but like, there's things like, so Facebook was a place where I found the sex positive group, and my partner at the time was, they were a part of that stuff. And so it was an easy in for me to go. But then, you know, you have like things like FetLife, which is like a Facebook for like kinky BDSM thingies. Ooh, spicy. And then there's like dating apps. I'm not going to mention the dating apps.
With genres, like, right? They have genres,
Just DM me on Twitter if you want to know what apps I'm using, okay?
This is my curiosity as an interviewer. There's no other reason for me to ask. I'm just curious.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So there's an app called like Field, FEELD, where it's like a lot of like poly, kinky folks, and I think like maybe if you connect with someone who's knowledgeable in a community, and they can
such as Michael Sinclair II, yeah,
yeah, maybe. But you know, you might link up with someone who really cares about this type of stuff of getting it to the masses and like getting it to people who are marginalized or not as privileged to kind of get in these things. And they try and get you to like these workshop or these classes. And so it's like, usually you kind of have to find an in. Not that that was my objective at any point. That was your question was, how do you find these things? And it's like, well, you just find like-minded people through some of these websites and apps that exist, or maybe you overhear someone and you like politely ask. I wouldn't tell viewers to do this or listeners. Like, you have to have a certain personality that's very welcoming and inviting, and be like, were you just talking about this? And like be cool and not like creepy. But but these are the ways that you like find these communities, is just like being generally interested, also be like caring and friendly and respect other people's boundaries. And then generally you can probably find yourself in those places to like, learn and connect with people and go from there, I guess.
You mentioned this being kind of an intersection of different domains. So, you know, you mentioned the learning more about, I don't know what's the right term, but like the marginalization of certain folks and in society, I would just call it that. What are some interesting points or takeaways that you can maybe share here? Maybe just a couple. That kind of opened your mind, like maybe you didn't know this before going into it, and it kind of like opened your eyes, right, to help you become Michael 0.75.
So I think what helped me learn some of those things in those communities is a lot of the times these people are sharing things that are like, and I say like safe space, quote unquote, but it's like kind of bullshit, because like you're exploring things that are like deeper, darker, sharing secrets that like, oh, you know, I'm trans and, you know, it's hard for me to find people who validate my identity or validate, you know, who I am. And, you know, this is how it shows up. Like I have, you know, family members who don't accept this. I have, you know, a partner that doesn't quite accept this. And then they tell the stories of like, you know, maybe something that kind of happened to them that wasn't ideal. I'm trying to like trigger things away for the most part, but like you can imagine what I'm speaking into. And then it's like, oh, you know, maybe you're black and you're into like BDSM kink stuff and like your family thinks it's weird, or you're like, you know, I don't like using ableist terms too, but like, we'll just say what someone would use is like, oh, you're a sicko, like you're strange, you know, what are you doing? Like, that's that nasty stuff. And so, and then like, you know, some bad thing will happen to them. And then you kind of just keep hearing these stories in these quote unquote safe spaces. And you're like, holy crap, like that's, you know, that's hard, that's dark, that's deep, like, goddamn, like, that doesn't sound fun at all, you know? A lot of people like to say like, oh, this side of the political spectrum is like snowflakes. I'm like, nah, man, these people are hard as, like, they're out here surviving, they're existing, you know? It's not easy. And you just keep hearing these things over and over and over and over and over again. And you're like, you know, hopefully for some individual, it's like, okay, I should probably look into this or like dig deeper. And so like, there's books out there that you can start reading, or like, you know, we mentioned YouTube, like sometimes people on YouTube will share their experiences about that. And then like, you just try and connect to it as another human being. You're like, you know, you put yourself in their people's shoes. Like if you've gone through something, sometimes you can, maybe it's not the same experience as someone else, but you can definitely like kind of sympathize or empathize and be like, oh shit, like I can see how that happens, or how you didn't feel supported, or some violence happened to you because of the way you choose to show up in the world. So all those things eventually, and that's why I said like, you know, that's where I really learned how to soften up, how to connect, how to, you know, and it's not like I didn't hear these things when I was growing up, being part of like life coaching and teen trainings and all these other things that I've done. This was just a different way of it, because it was a different context. And then I was also older and more mature to able to understand some more of these concepts. But that's generally how I got to learn about all these things of the intersectionality of like being disabled, being LGBTQI plus identifying, or, you know, being, that's what you are, and being, you know, POC or black or whatever. It's all connects at the end of the day. And luckily, weirdly, in some ways that like some of the sex positive kink BDSM stuff, it also like, it also comes up within these conversations. So yeah.
Got you. So maybe it would be helpful to just retrace or go back a little bit even more. Can you tell me a bit about your upbringing, kind of like from the very beginning, right? Even before the Navy, like, what was Michael like as a teenager or as a kid? Like, where did you grow up and all that stuff?
Yeah, this is a great question. Strap in. So I was born in San Diego, California, and quickly then my parents didn't. Well, not quickly, but like I think my sister was also born at some point soon, and we were out of like San Diego, Poway, Mira Mesa, kind of bouncing back and forth. My mom's parents, or my mom's folks, she's Filipina. They all were around Mira Mesa. If you're like Filipino and you know Mira Mesa, you're like, yeah, that tracks. And then my dad, who's Caribbean, Jamaican, Afro-Latino, his family's out of Poway. So it was a lot of like moving, like, I got passed around through like family members and stuff like that. And then at some point my parents didn't want to be together. My mom ended up taking us to the Philippines for a bit, and then my parents wanted to come back together, so we came back to San Diego, and then San Francisco, and then this was like, so I moved a lot. So like this starts the arc of like me moving a lot. So like when we came back to San Francisco, I was around 5, moved to Orange County when I was around 6 or six or 7. I think it's 6. And then from there, I was there for 2 years in Orange County. And then I moved to the Philippines when I was 8, which was like the most tragic thing as a kid. Like I can still remember it was my birthday and we were crossing the state line, or the what was that called? The date line. I think it's the date line across the Pacific Ocean. And I think like my birthday was was like cut real short because like it was like the 8th, and then we were like transitioning over. It's like, well, there's like a couple hours you get to your birthday. See you later, kid. Just like, damn it. And like on top of that, like I was celebrating my birthday in the air, and then like the airline stewardesses who I didn't know, and like you've probably been through those flights so many times. Like if you ever like watch the Shang-Chi moment in like where they're in the airplane, that recent Marvel movie, and they're like chicken, vegetable, or pork, and then they're like, I want this option, like we don't have that option, and then you're like, the other option, we don't have that option, and you're just like, and on top, like that kind of experience on top of like stewardess trying to do their best job to satisfy like an 8-year-old crying his birthday, like all that happened. It was brutal. And then we land in the Philippines. And on that day, we went to like this local like food, like this, not food, but like it was just like a hut that had food, and they serve food, and you can buy food, and like flies were covering the whole thing. Like flies everywhere. Like they had to brush it away, and it was just like waves of flies, and then there's like ominous thunder in the background just like crashing down. It was like horrendous. Anyway, I'm going into too much deep.
If you look up culture shock in the dictionary, like that scene is right there, right?
Trauma. And then I was there from 8 to 14 in the Philippines, bouncing around from the Pangasinan countryside to Makati, Manila, and then I went back to. But then we moved back to America, to Vegas, and I was 14 and got another culture shock because I was Filipino as fuck, basically, and went to American high school looking like a black person, but not having any black person qualities because I was Filipino as fuck, fresh off the boat kind of thing. And then, so I was there for that long, and then 14 to 18 in America for high school, went to the Philippines at 18, came back here when I was 19 because I was joining the Navy. So that's kind of like the growing up, moving around stages. And and between that, like the biggest like things that I really did during that time was like gaming a lot. I was gaming a ton because it was the only way I could like connect with people, being so transient. And then while I was in Vegas, the biggest thing that happened there was like I joined a team training life coaching thing from ages like 14 to I went through ages 14 to 19 or something along those lines. I kind of get spotty, but like I did like the team trainings, the adult trainings. I was taught how to be a facilitator, to like like Tony Robbins type of things where you're just like, oh, let's talk about a topic, let's try to motivate you, XYZ. So that was all that stuff up until the military. It was just like kind of everywhere and anywhere, and a bunch of life experiences all at once.
Man, there's a lot to unpack there. Well, let me try.
Yeah, so I was just like firing off things forever.
No, it's good. So, is there something that you? First of all, I'll start with the easy one. Is there something that you? Is there something about you that you carry that is like very distinctly Filipino, like, you know, from ages 8 to 14? Because those are your formative years, right? So, is it just is there some aspect of the culture, not necessarily language, that like you feel is like very grounded in you even today?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I mean, I eat rice every day. Like I try, like, you know, rice is like rice is the big one, like for
staple.
sure.
Yeah,
rice staple. It is hard because I don't even like I can speak Tagalog not as fluently as I used to. So obviously I can do that. Shoot. I really don't know, like, what's something that's, like, distinctly Filipino.
It's just
that
subconscious, right?
do.
You just kind of absorb it. So maybe it's unfair to ask because it's just part of you.
Yeah. There might be some sort of things that kind of become... Oh, here's one. Like, I have an indoor pair of sandals. Like, I have to always own... I guess I call them sandals, but it's just like your regular beach sandals or whatever. But,
yeah. That's
an
Asian thing. I got it right here too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like you have the indoor pair that you don't wear outdoors. You just wear that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I got them.
Always, man.
That's what I got. Like till
That's
the day
what's
I
up.
die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you really into basketball? Because I think basketball is like a religion in the Philippines, right?
It is. I try to get into it. That's not my sport for some reason. Like, and I'm short. I'm like 5'8" or 5'7". Like
that never held anybody back. All the Filipino players
that's
I've played
true.
with over the
they
years.
They dribble though. You get your ankles broken out there.
Yeah.
And they dribble in sandals. Like you get mixed up.
I used to play pickup ball in Canada with a lot of the Filipino community, and they're just playing in like barefoot and in sandals. And it's just like and you have to always keep the ball up high because they would always like steal the ball. Like they're just very fast with their hands.
So fast. Yeah. No, I was more of a soccer player growing up, so I just kind of liked soccer more, and I always tried to get into basketball. It just didn't quite work out because like
Gotcha.
I think the threshold is just like, oh, I'm a black kid, and like you expect, you know, greatness from the moment I touch the ball. I'm like, nah, like I'm having fun. I'm learning. Like,
yeah. There's also all the kids stereotyping, like this guy looks like this, so he must be Michael Jordan or something.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, not really.
Everybody's got their own path. Yeah. So the next question is like, then going back to the U.S. at 14, you mentioned like you were effectively like. You are Filipino, but like then you're immersed in that culture, and you come back. And did you have to feel like you had to deliberately change? Because you know how kids are, right? We're all very impressionable, and like you're really influenced by the friends that you have, or just people around you at school who you know, or bully you, or don't bully you, whatever, right? At least in my experience. So how did you make that transition? Was it a fast transition?
No, we'll get into that. So I'm also doing the classic Filipino knee up, like my knee's up.
Yeah. That's right, man. I'm resisting. I feel like there's so many commonalities.
No, bro, do it. Just do it right now.
All right.
This is if you're gonna do it on any interview, it would be this interview, bro. What's up?
The unfortunate thing is that this chair is actually not that conducive to being more comfortable. I'm in my hotel room right now, but I'm with you in spirit, man.
My most Filipino thing too is if I'm eating like spam or eating like tortang talong, which is like this fried eggplant type thing with egg, like I will put my knee up, I will eat with my hands, like rice, soy sauce, you know, egg mixture. I'll just eat with my, that's another thing. But, so when I was coming back at 14 and like, I was essentially just like straight up 100% Filipino, like, straight up. And the transition was not good. It was like people expected me, like they're like, "Hey, what's your favorite rapper?" And they're like, I was like Missy Elliott, because like she was a vibe. She was you know, her stuff slapped back then. But like people like laughed at me because like it's not nowadays where you have a whole bunch of feminine rappers or female presenting rappers and stuff.
Yeah,
it was like kind of back then where like rap music was still very patriarchal and
it was just Biggie or Tupac, right? It was just
Biggie, Tupac, 50 Cent, like all that type of stuff. And so I was like, no, like it's Missy Elliott, and I get heckled at for that. And then you know, I didn't know all the like African or African American or black terms at that moment because you know, at that point I was still pointing with like my mouth, like the very Filipino, like, where's this thing? And I was like you can't see me on screen. This is video, but if you're Filipino or you know someone's Filipino who has a very
you've got all the mannerisms because you grew up there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like pointing with like my lips and stuff, and I still had like, you know, my accent was still like, you know, Filipino in some senses. Like I was still speaking with an accent because I had to like kind of get rid of that, and I knew that was a process. My parents talked to me, like we all knew it was a thing when I was coming back, but that like held me back for like the first year, and then by the time you go into your second year, your sophomore year, like people assigned you identity by that point, so like I was already wrecked, and so like, you know, in high school you have your like cliques and groups, and like I was part of like the misfits, like thrice
You're
removed.
in the deep
like,
cut misfits group, yeah.
Oh yeah, like because like you're not cool enough to be with our kids. Like I listen to rock music, but like there were like rock kids who like that was their whole like life and being and what they were assigned, and have bands that they're a part of, or like go to shows all the time. Not that I didn't go to shows, right. You know, or there's the nerds, but like, you know, there were the anime nerds before anime nerds were cool, or like whatever. And like, yeah, I listened and watched the anime, but I wasn't someone who was like fully depth into anime. And then you had like your gamers and like, you know, your cool gamers who are like, oh, you know, I play all these other things, and like I was just playing Halo. Like Halo was cool and not cool at some points. Yeah. But in my high school it wasn't like the biggest thing. So like I was like thrice removed, and like there was like a group of 5 or 6 of us who were like, you know, and 3 of them belonged to a family.
I mean, you
so
just didn't
like,
fit into a box, that stereotypical box, whatever it was, right?
Exactly. So like, and that was the rest of my high school. Like I didn't go to any dances. I didn't do you know, social pariah. And what was weird is like I had a secondary life, it felt like back then, when I was going to these teen trainings, like life coach things where like I was more popular, you know, people really looked up to me, respected me, you know, people, I was, you know, helping other teenagers with their lives and adults with their lives and stuff like that. And then I would go to high school and then I'd just be like this like social pariah. So it was very weird.
Mm-hmm. Two worlds, right? And back then, I mean, I can even imagine like just as a kid, like you don't really want to mention. I mean, you're in a very meaningful leadership role as a coach or in that field, but it's like it's not something you can just mention to your classmates. Just like they'll just like stuff you in a locker. Like, what's going on here, right?
Yeah, like I'm helping out like people in their mid-30s through like divorces or relationship problems and shit like that, and then and then I'm also trying to like, you know, not get bullied in school. It's like very weird.
But I want to ask you though, how does the life coaching thing work when you're a youngster? Because it just like and this might be wrong, like my perception of it is just like you got to be like an old person to be able to you know, help people. Generally, you're helping people who are kind of less experienced or younger than you. So how do you embrace being in that sort of leadership role at a young age, and what's that dynamic like?
Yeah, I think it's because I already lived a very, like, you know, I had my own traumas that my family had gone through and stuff like that. I've seen enough of the world. I've traveled so much. You know, I've met so many people. You know, I was just still very introspective. Like who you see today is still kind of who I was back then, except, you know, more little and didn't have as much experience. But like that mind, you know, that curiosity, that drive to be supportive and helpful of other people was still there. So because of all that, you know, I was doing the teen trainings from 14 to 17 and, you know, helping all these teenagers and doing that for enough years every summer because it was more of a summer program. And then I went to the adult training stuff, and it was kind of like more the same. Like a lot of ways, like adults don't really outgrow their high school teenage selves. And so like, there's still something to connect on that aspect. And like, I would still say I was like very wise for my age back then. Although looking back now, I'd be like, I'd never let a 15 or 16, 17-year-old tell me what to do. But honestly, like that's kind of where I was mentally at that point in my life, and still am in many ways, of like just kind of being older than I am and projecting out. And so, yeah, I was just like, and some adults really didn't like that, obviously, because like they, you know, to some degree it's true that I didn't have as much experiences, but the wisdom was there, and like, you know, kind of the insights were there. So like some adults were much more open to me helping them out. and really enjoyed like my perspective on things, and were like, God, you're like really super wise. And so it was just like really validating in those type of ways. But obviously the dichotomy of having that and being respected by, you know, all spectrum of folks, and then going to high school was just like, you know, I think healthily in some ways, like I just separated the two and just accepted my existence, you know, wherever I showed up, of kind of what context I was presented in. So that's kind of how I would answer all that.
Yeah, that's really. Are there tools that you learned that you're still using? There must be, right? But what are some of the tools that you learned from being in that experience that you're still sort of using today or helping others with?
I think it's kind of like people who go into psychology or become psychiatrists or stuff like that. Like, there's a way that you can kind of, I hate to say break down, but there's ways that you can be perceptive, I guess is probably the better word, perceptive of people, and then start to kind of glean other things from them. It's kind of like playing Magic, like the way that people play their cards and tap and shuffle their cards, and the way that they sequence things, and the way that they, you know, speak, and the language they use. Like, you can assess a lot of those things, and like you learn those things within those trainings, not in a creepy or weird way. It kind of just starts to organically happen. Like, they kind of give you the baseline, and then you start building upon it, and it kind of organically happens as you keep, it's a skill, like you just keep learning it. And at some point it doesn't kind of shut off that like analytical perceptive part. And so that's kind of what, it doesn't quite go away. And that's kind of what I've kept with me, is just being very perceptive and insightful of other people's lives and their experiences. And then being from there, being able to connect with people. And I just care about people. I don't really, like, the thing that I'm really grateful is, like, I don't have any sort of goal, or I don't have any sort of, like, I don't want things to be reciprocated. Like, I will go
almost
to
like
places,
there's no ulterior motive. I just want to.
Right, exactly. I have no alternative motive when I'm trying to help someone, even in brief snap moments, or just speaking to someone for like a quick 5 seconds, or just hanging out. Like, I was at the airport and like recently, and the flight got delayed, and someone else was with me, and we were just like chit chatting, and I was just helping them through stuff, and it was just like, no, I'm just doing that. There's no alternative motives there. So, and that's something I'm really grateful that I've learned and developed, because like there's definitely a wrong way to do that. Of like, and you see it happen in some of these like industries or whatever, where people just take advantage of other folks. But I'm like, no, like, I just really like helping, and I like people. And if I can find people who are like really nice and amazing and going through it, like, I love working from that space. So that's generally how I kind of like still apply and use it every day. It's nonstop. You can't turn it off. That's the one thing. It's like, do you really want to learn this? Do you want to learn this? You want to, because you can't turn it off. And if you can't handle that, probably don't do it.
It's a power. It's like a superpower that you can't choose to no longer have the X-ray vision or adamantium claws or something, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that must be helpful. It must be helpful too, just to be able to, being perceptive, just be able to like also see through people, because I feel like also in the world there are people that are not kind of like bad actors. Like, there are people that want to take advantage of other people. So hopefully that also helps you see through those people, right? Because there are some people that, I just gotta say, like, some people are kind of fake, right? They want to appear to be good, but hopefully that also means you can see through those sorts of people.
Yeah, I would say that, like, I'm not perfect. There's definitely times where I've got worked or whatever, but like, because to some extent, like, I like to buy into the, generally,
like, give people the benefit of the doubt kind of thing.
Yeah, generally people are acting either within their self-interest or trying to be good. There's a balance of that, and sometimes those align with their self-interest being also good. But for the most part, no. There's definitely times where you pick up that someone is probably like trying to clout chase or have alternative motives or be weird or fake or whatever. And actually that's been super helpful as I've gotten to, like, I don't know what you want to call this, but like a different notoriety or different like level or status within the communities that I operate in, whether that's D&D, MTG, content creation, XYZ. Like, that served me a lot, because I the thing that I do, it's not like I'm talking crap or like, trying to do anything bad to those people. It's just that the ability that it gives me is that I get to really connect with people who I care about and connect with people who I consider like good actors. Not like the profession of acting, but like people who want to create a positive force or create some sort of positivity in their daily lives.
Maybe
so
uplift others as opposed to feeling like everything's a zero-sum game, right?
Correct. And so that's much easier to identify. Like there's, Joe Johnson, who, I'm in tabletop jocks with, or he brings me on. And like, that's someone who I'm like, perfect, great. Like, love you. There's Lexi, Black Girl Mage. There's Emily Ervelina, Bree, I forget her, Brianna, people who I like interact with Twitter, like and Josephine McAdams. There's just like these communities that I've built on online on Twitter and stuff, and in real life. Like obviously I have my community here in Spokane. It's just like I just want to be surrounded by good people and like help them in their lives, and also help other people, and then those people in turn, kind of do the same thing because I've been giving them spoons and like giving them props and giving them energy to kind of be able to kind of fight through life's bullshit all the time. Because it's like, it kind of is kind of the default of the world is out to get you in the kind of society that the successful societies in the world, countries and stuff, is a very predatory thing. And it's like, God, like it's hard to just, have people who are good faith, like succeed and do well and try and lift other people up. So I think that's kind of what I use that perceptiveness for.
Yeah. I feel like you have a good perspective on things now, but were there times in the past where maybe you did get worked, or maybe something that wasn't great happened to you, and like if you can talk about them and maybe how you learned from those experiences? Like maybe
so go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, this is like so boring. Like the straight up answer is like, no, I've just always had these like headlights on. Like I haven't really got worked in a way that was like so detrimental that I have to speak into it. Like it's, it's a small thing. I notice it, and maybe I got worked a little, and it's just like, oh, okay, I noticed this. Cool. I don't need to, we're good here. Like right. I'm done. So there really hasn't been anything like that, I think, in my life that has had any substantial effect on me. And this is something I speak into, I think, on other interviews that I've had, but it's not a fun experience. Like, to be honest, I'm just getting shorked all the time because it's like I'm constantly doing the work. Like, it's always active, and that is draining. That is work to kind of, facilitate. Do I want to work with this content creator? This is feeling a little bit weird. Do I want to continue working with these people, because I noticed these little things, and does that add enough for me to say no to this project? Like, right, I take the L in different ways where I might say no to projects, or I might say no working with these certain people, and usually it's a good outcome because like later on I check, I'm like, oh, that blew up and I didn't have to be a part of it. Yeah. But it's a lot of front end work. Like you're doing the work all up front and not having to
constantly
react.
Assessing. It's almost like threat assessment or something, right?
Yeah. So I don't have to react as much. The downside is the work is all front loaded instead of having to deal with the drama as it comes or in the back end. Like, so I would say that's kind of why, my answer to your question, and it's not as fun or entertaining as it could be in an interview.
That's okay. We don't need to have everything turn into a 30-second soundbite on TikTok or something.
Fair.
Yeah. Also, just go back a little bit, Michael. Like, are you at peace with your identity now, right? Because there's the Filipino aspect of your identity. There's the African American aspect of your identity. And you basically said that you had to embrace more of or not embrace, but like you absorbed much more of the African American culture, obviously being back in America at 14. So how do you look at that today? Like, do you see yourself as one over the other, or how would you describe that? I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'm curious.
Yeah. Couple things. I would say that I define myself more as a black person. And it's taken a long time. you know, love my mother, love my family, but, you know, there's still colorism in the Philippines. Not as much anymore. Like, people love, in some aspects, like Asian folks really love Black people for what they represent in some ways. And, but growing up, it was something that I tried to shed away from, especially when I was growing up in the Philippines. Like, that was a place where, the ages 8 to 14, I got called the N-word almost every day. Like, the hard R. Like,
oh, shit.
Just drilled into me. Like,
oh, man.
And so, like, why would you want to embrace that side of yourself when it's constantly being hounded? And so, like, I really, like, stayed away from it. Like, you know, I would embrace my Filipino side and, like, try and act more white in some ways. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten more into, like, being in touch with my Black side and presenting, like, just operating from a more Black, what do you call this? Like, perspective or mannerism. And it's true, like, what people see, if I'm walking down the street, someone will probably more identify me as being a Black person than, you know, being Filipino straight up. Like, there's only some times where a Filipino will be like, I got you. Like, you're Filipino.
You got the sandals, man.
yeah, it's the sandals.
You have to be at your place, though, to know that. So.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll catch Filipinos slipping. Like, they'll say something, and I'll rip back at them in Tagalog. Like, oh shit!
Yeah, they do. They think you
pasensya.
Can't understand. That's the funnest. That's the funnest shit, man. I tell you.
Yeah. So good, but I like it. Now that I've kind of felt very secure in my Blackness and what that meant, especially within the context of Black Lives Matter and all this other, like, social awakening, but also social, like, sleeping, because it's going back to kind of, like, more of, like, business as usual, whatever, Black business. But I'm also, like, trying to get back into, like, my Filipino side and family and stuff like that, because I've kind of put that on the back burner. And, like, if you look at my mom and my sister, they look a little bit more Filipino than I do. I look definitely more Black. And so it's always just kind of like a balancing act in that sense. But I would say that, like, you know, on my and most of the things I answer, if there isn't, like, a way to kind of be multi-ethnic on a answering thing for, like, school or work or driver's license or whatever, I just put Black, because it's just like, well, that's my experience every day, to be honest. And so and it's probably safer for me to operate from that standpoint than to kind of try and operate and say, like, I'm Filipino, like, you know. So yeah, I would say that I kind of more identify with, like, you know, the Black side of me.
Yeah, I get you. Okay, so let's talk about how you got into content creation, because I believe that you sort of made your inroad first through D&D, if I'm not mistaken. Can you tell me the story of how that happened for you?
Yeah. So how that happened was my last deployment with Sniper Platoon, I knew that we weren't going to be around, like, a bunch of electronic, like, because sometimes you can, like, bring your video games, your Xbox, your consoles, or whatever. And, like, Sniper Platoon, sometimes you're just, like, out in a place where there's no electricity or internet or whatever. So I was like,
it's kind of hard to play Halo.
Yeah. So I was going to go into D&D, and what got me into D&D is I was actually already, so the transition to D&D happened from Felicia Day's The Guild. She had this YouTube series called The Guild. I watched it. I was big into World of Warcraft. That was, like, a lot of my gaming. Between Halo and World of Warcraft, that was a lot of my gaming. And so Felicia Day then, through that successful thing of The Guild, I think she started the Geek and Sundry channel. And Geek and Sundry, like, I was just watching all the shows, like B. Dave Walters, you know, ask Ask a Black Nerd or Ask Your Black Nerd Friend or something like that was on there, and, like, a bunch of other cool things like Tabletop Day with Will Wheaton and all those folks. And then Critical Role came on, and this was when, like, the first episode aired, and there's, like, 12 viewers in there, and I was, like, 1 of 12. Like, you know, people like to, like, gatekeep, like, oh, you haven't been a Critical Role fan. I'm like, bitches, shut up. Like, if someone enjoys it, like, let them fucking enjoy it.
I was there from day one, right?
Yeah, I was day one. Like,
day one, baby.
Yeah, day one. Like, you know, you hear Joe Johnson say, like, I'm his day one. Like, I was Critical Role's day one. Like, I was straight up that Mofinky from the rip. And I'm like, you don't see me gatekeeping people. But I watched that and I was like, oh, this is a thing you could do in deployment. And, like, this seems really fun. And, like, and I know I had to just Dungeon Master off the rip. Because no one else is going to do that. And so I Dungeon Mastered for, like, Marines and sailors on that deployment. And then I would talk about my experiences on Twitter I already had like 1,000 or so people because I used to be really big into like Keep Calm, Chive On, but that community is weird and I don't really talk about that. But then I got into like D&D stuff, and I was just trying to be helpful to other people who were like exploring D&D, understanding D&D, trying to like improve and like my experiences and what I can say to them. And then through that, people were like, "Oh, Michael, you should like really apply to this channel called Encounter Roleplay because they're having like open casting." And so I joined open casting. I was like, I really want to be a player. I've been the forever DM at that point for like 3 years. They're like, "Hey, we'll take you, but you're the only person who's in the cast who has any DMing experience. Can you just DM and then we'll let you become a player later on?" I was like, "Sure, we'll do that. I'll concede to that."
Yeah.
And that's how I got started into content creation, was through Encounter Roleplay picking me up. And then it was just show after show after show after show, like kind of getting lucky. I understand my privilege and the luck that I've had to kind of just jump into next project. Mm-hmm. And I've had some friends who've kind of helped me along the way.
Yeah. And
that's how I kind of went from there, as like Encounter Roleplay into Cobalt Press, which is a pretty big TTRPG.
What does TT stand for?
Tabletop role playing.
Oh, tabletop
games.
role playing game. Okay.
Yeah, so they're big TTRPG like company that makes like additional content, supplementary content within house. So I joined them, and then I joined other bigger groups, and then it's kind of just all rolled from there. And then I eventually got into Magic somehow by watching the Command Zone and Spellslingers through Geek and Sundry too. So Geek and Sundry was the big liftoff, with Sean Plott, Day 9. Mm-hmm. So Geek and Sundry in many ways is what really like got me into all this nerd stuff, and it was like, oh, I can actually, not that I can actually do that, I just put in my mind like, oh, maybe there's a chance I do this at some point, and I'm interested. So that's kind of how all that happened.
I feel like obviously everybody has luck and privilege to get to where we are today, but there's also a lot of initiative on your part, right? Because you sort of like, you're like exploring these new things, and you're just like, let me try to get this gig, right? And so I don't think you should downplay that. Like, you obviously you did a good enough job once you were in those roles to be like, hey, we don't absolutely hate Michael. He's actually a good DM. Like, let's get him onto the next gig, right? So it's like, don't downplay that, man. Yeah.
I guess, like, I don't know. It is very weird. Like, the culmination, the peak in some ways has been like playing D&D with Matthew Mercer and playing Magic the Gathering with Post Malone. Like, I don't know how the fuck that happened, and it feels super like I'm like, I don't know, it was a mistake.
That's like you've already reached the Everest of those domains, right? Doesn't get bigger than that. Like,
I'm just like, I'm such a good performer. I tricked everyone into making me be at their tables. Like, that's kind of. But I appreciate you.
You're underselling yourself, man.
I appreciate that
because. I have to admit, I'm not a regular like RPG or D&D player, but just from my vantage point, I feel like the DM is like the hardest thing to do, right? Because I'm not saying it's easy to show up as a player and be in the character, but the DM is like everything, right? So the fact that you kind of started that your career as a DM like that. That's pretty significant, right? And the fact that they were looking for a DM probably says something about how challenging that role can be to do it right. I would say, because every role you could do it badly or you could do it well.
Yeah.
But obviously, you did it more on the well side. So
yeah, I'm a bit rusty. I haven't DM'd since like I started showing up in shows. Like, so I think I haven't really DM'd in like it's 2022. I got my first gig around 2016. So like I haven't I've done one shots and whatnot as a DM, but like I need to get, within a year I'm gonna get back into DMing. But I've just been a player character. But I appreciate what you're saying. Like, yeah, it's taken some initiative. It's taken some like performing well. Some work. Like I do like trying to analyze my character, analyze the parties I'm with, like do all that good stuff and operate from that standpoint. So like I appreciate that. And like I think being on this podcast is definitely there's very small times and small moments where I feel like, yeah, I earned being here. I can see what moments led me up to here and some of the work that I've done. So I appreciate you taking the time to say that.
No problem. I think you deserve it. And another thing I want to ask is just, I also feel like there's a range of how people get into D&D, right? Because like the stuff that you're doing, which is I would consider to be quite high level D&D, which is like you're actually character acting. Like, you are that person, but I know there's also people who are more casual that are just like, I'm here to like roll some dice and kill some monsters, and I'm just playing somebody, right? So how do you, like, the question here is like, how do you develop being a certain character in D&D? Because that's something that I feel like when you're watching as an audience, you just kind of see the final product, but you don't actually know. It's kind of like watching a movie. It's like you don't actually. Most people are just like, okay, Shia LaBeouf is like Indiana Jones or whoever, but like, how do they like, what's the process like? So what's your process, right?
I guess that's true. Like, I would, say nowadays that I find myself more in that actor performer role. Before it was like more like, oh, I'm just a player, I'm a professional like Dungeons and Dragons player, where now I'd say more acting, performing. But I think my general thing has always been, I first look at the rest of the party, which is like just a quick thing, figure out where the gaps I need, if there's the gap that needs to be filled, like a certain role, and then I start going into my character. So then I will like I'll have an idea maybe in my head, starting to form about the let me think about that. The setting. So I first imagine the setting of the game that we're playing, because obviously you need to start from somewhere. So I start thinking about the setting, and I try and like put myself in a weird way where like, it's that insight, that perception I have about people, but I try and use that in a fantasy setting where like, it's kind of like, how you see like in X-Men where Xavier puts on like this, I forget what it's called, like the
Cerebro, right?
Cerebro, like he like Cerebros and just like identifies all these mutants and stuff like that. Like, in some ways, that's kind of how my brain works when I'm starting to build a character. Like, I Cerebro into what are all these people I can imagine that are super interesting in this world, and it just like kind of just like pops up everywhere, and like, what is like an interesting walk of life, and like a way that a beautiful intersectionality of a character can form. And from that, I start imagining like their life experiences. Okay, what does their class say about them? How did they become like a warlock or a wizard or a fighter or whatever? What is the thing that got them there? And I develop their backstory. You also have backgrounds in D&D, so like I imagine like, what got them into this background, because something had to facilitate that. Mm-hmm. And then I start pulling from real life experiences from like, right, I've met so many people in my life. I've been in so many workshops. I've been in and heard so many life stories. And so I start like picking things from those things and aspects and mannerisms and, sometimes accents and all that. And I start just like, it then starts like from that Cerebro action type of thing. I start pulling from history, and I start trying to like, sync all these aspects into one character until I have one. And then I also then start, maybe I'll have to go reassess and look at some D&D stuff or TTRPG things and start pulling from things to make it work within the character, because I want my mechanics and I want the role playing of the character kind of to sync up very nicely. So it's just easier to kind of perform within that. And then that's kind of how I approach being a character. And then obviously once you're in character, once you're in game, trying to then use improv at the same time to work with your other cast members of, the player characters and the DM, because like you still have to entertain, you still have to tell a story, you still have to have things that bring people in, or like interesting stories or beats. And you want that to be organic, and I do that through improv and trying to be like, oh, this is a point of connection between my character and someone else's character, or how does my character fill up this dead space? And so I think that's kind of the culmination of all those aspects kind of bring to light what I do, I think.
That's incredible. Like, I sort of suspected that was your method, but I'm glad that you sort of confirmed that, because to me it's just kind of like, there's so much going on when you're trying to role play or be in a campaign at a high level that I feel like most people don't really see that level of craft. It's just like how, again, I'll use the analogy, when you watch a really good movie, you don't think about like how it's made, you just kind of enjoy it, right? And I feel like there's also an aspect of like, to create a good product or to entertain the audience, you have to do all that work. You have to put in the work, right? So that's incredible. Like, that's stuff that you don't have to do in Magic, quite honestly. Like, it's just
no.
Like, you're actually like doing all these. Like, you have to have social skills, which not a lot of Magic players have. But you have to have like you have to prepare, you have to like figure out who your character is, and I'm also wondering, like, have there been situations that you've been in where maybe there's such a large skill gap between you and the other people who are role playing, or maybe you're on a different wavelength where that becomes like problematic almost. It's kind of like playing a sports team where it's like, you know, one person's like a professional athlete, and then you're passing the ball to somebody who barely knows how to dribble the ball. So it's like, does that become problematic sometimes, like the dynamic?
Yes, it does. But trying to be professional, trying to be a performer, like you really just try and there's some times where like you just can't get the person to go, but you do your best, and you do your best every week. But like you really try and give people the bone. You really try and like
to be a professional.
Pass the baton.
Really.
Yeah, and like if they drop it, it's like, okay, sheesh, like I'll go pick it up. And then maybe they're like just so focused on fulfilling a certain part of their role or their story, like, you know, trying to like think of an idea without bringing someone who's, well, that person's whatever. We had like a someone who wouldn't heal, and they're like a healer, but they had this like weird thing where they can like be 5 different people at one time, and then like, but it didn't really amount to anything because they were so focused on that like mechanic and that thing that like it didn't lend itself to the story. And anytime we tried to like bring something over, it was just like this long drawn out thing that ended up kind of being dead. And it's just like, okay, but you do your best. And then like, you know, and sometimes there's beautiful moments where like, you know, I can see this. I think it probably happened in that game. But there's beautiful moments where like it's an easy layup. You're just like, here, buddy, like, all you got to do is like touch the ball and you'll
just don't blow the layup.
Thing.
It's right there.
Yeah, just don't blow it up. And then like they do it and they look great, and you're like, cool, like I did it. My work is done for the season. Like I finally did it. So yeah, those things do happen, and you just got to kind of work with it, because like, you know, or like the sad part is like, and I don't think this has really happened. It might happen once or twice and like 3 times in like my career, but like, or you just don't pass them the ball, and you just like, maybe they can, because they don't want, maybe sometimes passing the ball is not the thing you want to do, and they find their little brilliant, bright moments when they're left alone. And sometimes that does occur and happen. So.
No, that's true. I mean, I can't speak for D&D, but I've definitely been on sports teams where it's just like, I know that person's going to shoot it every time I pass them the ball. The ball's never coming back to us. And so I can't pass them the ball because I know they're also like not making that basket like 70% of the time. So I just can't pass that person the ball. I'm sorry, but it's different though, right? Because I think in sports, like there's actually an objective goal, which is winning. Whereas in this, it's actually kind of like, I think it is like for the community, or it's like to make people like almost like a group effort, or to entertain, right? So I guess it's kind of a flawed analogy. Yeah.
No, it's not. Like it still works. Like the analogy of just trying to like, right, you want to make the team. It's not a flawed thing, like other than a high level like NBA and like maybe college basketball, where you're not going to pass the ball to someone who's not going to make the thing, because, you know, but it's like high school ball, or like, you know, pickup games, or fantasy, like, or you know, or just whatever, like a after school team. Like, yeah, you pass that person the ball, like, you know, and you hope that they do something well with it. So like, it's the same thing when it comes to D&D. Like you need to pass the ball and hopefully that they do something with it.
I also want to talk to you about your voice acting prowess, because that's also something that I think you're quite gifted at. Like, can you tell me a bit about that and sort of how you developed your craft in that area? This is really inside the actor studio now with Michael Sinclair II. So,
oh shit!
Tell me your method.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, I think this all started within like, I feel like most performers things start in the shower. Like it just starts in the shower. It's your private little space. You sound great. You can hear yourself.
The acoustics are amazing.
Yeah, you just sound like, you know, you sound like Luther Vandross, you know what I'm saying? And that, yo, girl, I can serenade you in the shower. But, no, it starts there. You know, I was a misfit group, right? So, like, in some ways, I was allowed the space to be weird and, like, talk to myself, or, like, make those weird noises in the school bus, or, like, make weird noises I'm walking to school, or if I'm walking to a friend's house, I got screamo music in my ear and I'm screaming, and like I probably look like, you know, someone who has lost it. So like a life of that, and then at a certain point, you know, in the like you pick up on these voices or these personalities that are just so freaking hilarious that you meet in real life, and you're just like, that's hilarious, let me use that voice. And then like you start doing it and you just make yourself crack up. And then, you know, I did that in the military. Like you meet all these personalities of like just some characters, and then you end up like using that for like a role or two, and then, you know, you start just picking up stuff here or there. Like, and I also like singing in the car, you know, even if it's like a lady's voice and it's high pitched, or like a, you know, or you know, you're doing like, you know, the rap albums where, you know, it's like the modulated deep voices, and you're just trying to hit those. Like it just is kind of something that I do all the time without thinking about it. And I hate, because that sounds like a pretty generic answer to these things, but it's like kind of true. You're just, you know, I'm in the house singing, I'm in the car singing, I'm, you know, at work making voices, just kind of entertain myself. Like that's kind of where I picked up all these voices. And a lot of it's, like I said, through either media, art, or just funny as shit things that you hear from other people in real life.
I feel like you've just had a really full life, because I mean, on the one hand, definitely, like you said, you just have a talent for voices, but also you've been exposed to so many different things, and without like trying to, you know, jump to conclusions, I feel like your lived experience in different parts of the world, and also in different parts of the U.S., and being deployed in the Navy or the military, like that all sort of culminates in you having your range, right? Because you can draw on all these different experiences, not just for voices, but just for like lived experiences, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And something that like I always like talk about is like my sometimes objective memory isn't good, but like my emotional memory or like an experience memory is there, where like I don't remember the people, don't remember the faces, but I might remember a sound, or I might remember the way I felt. And from there, sometimes I can pull things that is useful later on, you know, where it's like performer acting, like, and that's sometimes where I draw like a feeling from, because it's like I've never experienced that feeling in my life, but I remember how I think I felt the other person feel in that moment. And so I just dig into that. Like, what happens if I was literally experiencing that? What happens if I was experiencing that through this character? This character is literally experiencing that. Let's dig into it. Like, what are the compounding factors? And then, like, just going there, getting dark, getting deep, and, like, and that's kind of, like, the stuff where all that stuff stems from, I think.
Where do you think you get your empathy from? Because you strike me as someone who is quite empathic, or has a fairly strong amount of empathy, or be able to see things through other people's lenses. Like, how did you get that through your upbringing? Like, or was it developed over time?
It's developed over. I think it's more developed over time. It's been a lot of work. Like a lot of things. The way that you see who I am today is a shit ton of work. I never feel like I'm ever put on idle. Like I don't just like. I don't have an idle switch. I'm just like, oh yeah, whatever. Let's cruise, baby. Yeah, because I think like speaking to my dad, like I don't talk to him. He's like in some ways disowned, but like he kind of has like sociopathic tendencies, and I think like I have some of that, but to combat that I've done a shit ton of like a gargantuan amount of work to work on my emotions, work on myself, work on my insight and perspective on other people, so that I can feel those things and work from that space. And through a lifetime of work and doing that and trying to do that, I think that's where I've gotten to where I am today. And I also had to like raise my family in some ways too. Like, you know, there was a lot of breakdown within family life growing up. And like, of course, like with all that transient nature, and like my parents always going through kind of like relationships, highs and lows, like most families do. But like on top of that, we were super transient. So, you know, I think that came with growing up quick, and that also came with having to establish a lot of empathy, because I had to like help other people out. And then through helping other people out, like my family, and seeing like the hurt around me, not even within my family, within people that we knew, and then like the teen trainings, adult trainings, like everyone kind of hurts. And, you know, I could shut that off, but like I don't like operating from that space, and it doesn't feel great. Like, you know, I could just like be like, I'm about me. I don't care what everyone's doing, but like I just get so much happiness and so much, you know, I just love being in those dark, deep zones. Like and operating from there. So I think it's just been a lifetime of work, to be honest, and it doesn't stop. Like that's the thing. It's like, Michael, when does this work stop? Like, you know, you've gotten there. Teach me what you do. When does this work stop? I'm like, it doesn't.
It never stops.
Yeah. So that's my answer probably to that question.
You mentioned having one sister, right? Is that you have one sibling?
I have a sister, and I also have a half sister who's much younger. She's like 10, and my full blooded sister, I guess is what you call it, is 31. Okay. So, and I'm 33. So, yeah, that's the age.
You mentioned your dad just now. What about the rest of your family? Like, how do you get along with them? What's that relationship?
Yeah, my mom is great. My mom's fantastic. She's like the coolest fucking person ever. My mom's 52, but she don't look 52, those Filipino
She's
blessings.
young, right? It's the Asian
Yeah,
gene.
yeah. I always had the hot mom problem, People were like, God damn, Michael, your mom. I'm like, yo, shit.
It's like, Michael, is that really your mom?
Yes, every time I have to answer, even now, like I went to Lululemon was it in Vegas?
It's like,
or
you're not
Denver?
trolling me, right, Michael? You're not. Okay.
Yeah, I went to Lululemon with my mom in Denver, like the outlet, and then the cashier thought that was like my girlfriend. I was like, no, that's my mom. But I'm used to it at this point, so it's just like, yeah, whatever. But yeah, I'm building. So my relationship's a lot better. Growing up, especially in the military, and like when I was off to be on my own and not having to raise my family and stuff, I kind of really pushed them back in a way, because I was just like, I get to work on me, I don't have to worry about the family stuff and like your problems, and I helped y'all as much as I can up until I got out of the house. I'm finished, I'm done. But within the recent years, my sister and my mom have done like some self work, and I've also realized at some point, like through getting older, relatives coming and going and passing and stuff like that, it's like, it's probably time to reconnect and kind of get soft and vulnerable and mushy and try and work on the stuff with the family. So I've been trying to tighten up my relationship with my mom and my sister. Still working on the half sister part. I do love them, and I do think about them from time to time, but I could be much tighter about that too. So
yeah. Everything's a work in progress, man. That's how it is. Yeah.
Work never stops.
It never stops. So, what's the proudest moment that you have in terms of D&D? Like, is there a particular thing that stands out to you in your body of work?
Honestly, like reflecting on it now, it's Bayforge Academy. That's the podcast that I've been a part of, and it's almost 3 years. And like, you don't normally see podcasts stay up that long.
That's a mainstay. That's long, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like a big, like, this is the top tier accomplishment, right? Like, if I wanted to point to easy one of those, it's like working with Matthew Mercer. Like, shout out Matthew Mercer. He's super cool, super awesome, personable person. But, and like, no shade to Matthew. Like, Matthew's great. But like,
but it's just the longevity, right? That's huge.
Yeah, and playing this character, I played the same character, this cast and crew that I'm with, like, phenomenal people. Just like really good people. We care about each other. We jive really well as a cast. And that's hard to find in D&D. You hear so many groups dissolving. You hear so much conflict.
It's like
and
a
drama
band,
that
right?
happens.
They break up. You can't keep the band together.
Yeah, and the cool thing about this group of people is D&D can be draining. It's just straight up draining. Like performing for that long, and especially depending on what projects
that's
they are.
That's the part I'm going to soundbite. Like Michael says, D&D can be draining. We'll just put that on TikTok. I'm just kidding.
Hell yeah, let's do it, please. No, please give me that fucking juice me up, James. But D&D can be draining, and a lot of people who perform in this space, like, it's true. And if you ever find a group that fills your cup, hang on to that thing as hard and fucking tight as you can. Like, that's the soundbite, to be honest, too, is like, if you find a fucking D&D group that just fills your fucking cup up and has no drama and is just like, it feels like home, like, you cling on to that motherfucker. Like, and that's what, like, Bayforge Academy is like, I know when I go sit down at Bayforge Academy, there's not all these overlying things I have to worry about of like, this person is making waves in a bad way in TTRPG, or they have like all this other life stuff that's questionable, or, when we sit down at the table, we're there to tell a story, and we genuinely care about each other. And from that space, we can operate and genuinely care about each other's characters. And, we've had people who I consider superstars in the D&D communities, and everyone who comes there just is like, wow, this group is different. Like we can, like, they can tell that, you know, this is a place where we get filled up, and we can go about the rest of our week, you know, feeling great, and like other D&D projects where it's more draining and stuff like that. So, and then additionally, the second part would probably be like, I got nominated for best character performance by the New Jersey Web Fest, something like that. I think it's a pretty popular thing maybe within podcasting, and I got nominated for best character performance. I don't know how that has shook out. I think the results might have just been posted, but just the nomination of that is super cool, I think.
Congrats on that. That's to have a recognition like that. That's
weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. I just never
weird?
thought I'd be nominated for you know, this character that I play like pretty frequently. It's just been, you know, because that character is kind of home, so it almost feels like second home. Like, it doesn't, and it's weird to kind of think that someone. It's a different way of thinking about it, to think that like someone's nominating that for best character performance, I guess.
Oh yeah, for sure. What is something that you want to tell people who have never tried D&D?
Ooh, that's a question right there. I think. Oh, that's a hard question. I think for people who have not played D&D, I think first and foremost is just like, if you've thought about it, playing D&D, try and find a good group and just play. Like, yeah, you've been sitting on that character. Yeah, you've been like trying to find the perfect group. But like, when I first also started playing as a player and not as a DM, I was part of like several groups that weren't great. But I guess I just kept like trying to go to them and trying to find better groups or places that I would mesh well with, or made my own group once I knew what I wanted. When I got out of the military, this was. So I would say just like give it a try, give it an honest try. If something's been holding you back, give it an honest try, and then after you do that, give it a couple more tries and find a group that might work well from you, and hopefully it works out. That's probably what I would say.
So just do it and just put in the reps, right? Because it doesn't have to be perfect from the get-go.
Right, yeah. You can be at a session where, like, you know, your character you only get to play as your character for like 15 minutes of the whole session. It's just like, well, that's a good start. Like, that, just get started. Just, you know, that's kind of how I approach lots of things in my life, I guess. Is
there a D&D equivalent of working the comedy cellar, or like, I'll describe what I mean. Like, you know how when you do stand-up, even really famous comedians like Chris Rock, they'll just like go to some small local stand-up to work on their material. So it's like, you know, I'm just gonna just work things out, right? Is there a D&D equivalent of that where it's like you do some sessions just to kind of work out what your character might be? Because I feel like that could be valuable.
Yeah. Not really. Like, adventure leagues exist where you can, like, there's LGSs, like how they would have Magic nights. They'll have like a D&D night called Adventure League where you can just like join up and like
a short-term session, right? Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like technically a character that can be co-signed. Like, you did these things, we mark it on a separate sheet, not your character sheet, that says you accomplished these goals, you've earned this XP, you've earned these items, you earned this gold, and you should be able to take that to any other LGS. So it's kind of like a running tally on your character. But as far as like content stuff of like, you know, I can like just submit my name to some show or some group of shows to kind of like work through my characters and stuff like that. I don't know if that exists in D&D or TTRPG stuff, but there's always like definitely small groups always trying to find people to kind of come together. And there's definitely like, I forget what you call it, but there's definitely like community Twitch channels where you can join these communities and be part of a show. Like, they're always trying to find new people to kind of like, you know, they try and find people that they think will work well with the rest of the group or the community, and then you can kind of probably get your start there. I think that's probably, like, one of them is the Initiative Order, which I've been on, and is one of my friends, Bree, I forget what her position is there. It's pretty high up. Like, she makes a lot of decisions, and but they're like a communal thing. So like she starts the decision, like she brings up the decision, and like every other people chips in. But there's places like those where you can operate from and maybe go from there and work on your craft, I guess.
Yeah.
And then start going from there. So they're out there. You just have to like look on Twitter and join, like, you know, just do some sleuthing, some investigating.
Yeah. You got to know people, right? To get into certain communities, whether it's polyamorous or D&D, you gotta connect. Network.
You gotta get vulnerable. You gotta put yourself out there just a tiny bit.
Yeah. Maybe a better analogy is like, I'm registering for a Magic tournament, right? And I registered these 75 cards for an RCQ or whatever, and you're still in round 4, you're still in contention, but you kind of realize halfway through the tournament that you've misbuilt your deck. So does that ever happen in D&D where it's kind of like, I have this character and we're kind of like halfway through the campaign, but I don't really like this character, or I don't really like where this is going for some reason. So is there a way to kind of mitigate that, or is that just kind of like a commitment thing where it's just like you kind of have to just see it all the way through without rebuilding?
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the table. A lot of dungeon masters will work on you to kind of they'll like tweak the story or tweak your character or tweak some sort of event in the game to kind of change it up and get through that, and change your character up. But there's other ones where it's just like, this is a little bit more crunchy is what we call it. Like, it's a little bit more crunchy. Like you're going to take your L's because you kind of put yourself there. And so, yeah, you have to kind of just work with what you got, and your party kind of helps you work. And, you know, right? You're working in a party, so it's not like you should be alone, even if your character isn't optimized. Like, the best thing they can do is probably the rest of your group can probably try and optimize, you know, your character through working with you. And ideally, that's kind of, if you're at a crunchy table, that's the way you would do that. But if you're at a place where, like, a DM's a little bit more flexible, then you can just change stuff up.
Got it. This is great, man. I hope whoever's listening to this, like, if someone's listening to this and they've never tried D&D, hopefully they'll be more interested, because, like, it just feels like, to me, that you're learning all these great social skills and improv skills, and you're doing it in hopefully a fun setting with minimal drama, as you alluded to, right? So it sounds way more fun than Magic, to be honest. If I've never ever played Magic before and I'm hearing about D&D versus Magic, I'd probably go with D&D. So.
I mean, that's fair. Yeah, they're two different things.
Yeah.
You know,
because ironically, Magic was invented as a way to pass the time between D&D sessions or during breaks, right?
Mm-hmm. So. Yep. You got two wolves. It's a D&D and Magic. This two wolves thing has been cracking me up lately.
Or two vices, however you want to define that.
Yeah. So, that's the D&D stuffs.
All right, let's pivot to Magic. So, how did you get involved in Magic and the Rakdos life? You got to tell me.
Oh, Rakdos gang, you know what I'm saying? All day, every day. You know, shouts out to, he doesn't know who I am, but Sean Plott, Day 9, Spellslingers on Geek and Sundry. Like, Geek and Sundry is just like...
That was the crossover for you, right? Yeah. Yeah,
Felicia Day follows me. I've met them in real life. They didn't know who I was back then. They kind of know who I am now, maybe a little bit. They do follow me. So yeah, it was Sean Plott. They had Spellslingers, and he like brought these like cool people on, and like I think they also had a tabletop day with Will Wheaton maybe too. So that's the first thing I saw in Magic. I was just like, I didn't really quite understand what's going on. Sean Plott was kind of more talking about the vibes of decks, like the personalities of decks. And then, you know, shout out to Jimmy and Josh. I checked out Command Zone and watched, you know, game nights. And I started from episode 1. And this was back in 2017, 2018. So I started from episode 1, watched the thing. That's how I learned how to play Magic. I never went to a LGS. I never looked up YouTube tutorials. Like, I didn't learn any of that stuff. Like, I just learned from, like, for some reason, there's probably easier ways to learn, but for some reason, I just, like, sat and just watched game nights and kind of figured out, like, oh, you draw your cards, you untap, you use mana to do this. And, it was a long, arduous process to do. And then eventually I just, like, went to an LGS and, like, played Standard, and then found a group to play Commander with. And then from there, I got more serious in, like, sometimes Commander, and then sometimes 60 card, like, you know, 1v1 stuff, and that's kind of how that's all kind of projected from there.
I feel like you kind of did it the right way, which is like you got into high fantasy and then D&D first, and then you got into Magic? Because there's definitely overlapping elements, right? So were there things about, kind of a leading question, but what aspects of Magic really were you attracted to initially?
Yeah, that's good. Honestly, it was just like it was interesting and it was scary. And when things kind of meet those two things, I don't know, I'm a weird person.
That's like, when you're in, right? Interesting and scary.
Yeah. I'm like, something's interesting.
That's the Michael Sinclair life right there.
I mean, kind of. So when something's interesting and scary, I'm like, yo, I'm in.
There's an intersection, there's two circles, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not like type A. I have nothing to fucking prove. Like, my brain is not okay, and that's how I operate. But yeah, so I thought that was cool, and I got into Magic from that, and I also was computer science, right? And so like I didn't notice it at the time, but like my brain was and I was already taking computer science at that point, but like my brain was starting to pick up on Magic stuff because I understood computer science in a way. So it kind of was, I think at the same time, it was triggering the same parts of my brain. And so it was easier to have an interest in it and hold the retention of the interest. And then I wanted to do so, like, right, it was scary. So I wanted to be like, can I explore this? How far can I go with this? Not from a challenge standpoint, but like, what is the end of, like, how far do I want to delve into this? Because it's scary, and I'm gonna give it an honest try. And then, yeah, that's kind of how I kept playing it.
Yeah, and why Rakdos? Why red and black?
Oh, why not Rakdos though?
Yeah, why not, right?
I think it's just the symbolism of what it is. It's like you have your, you've heard, like, I think I'll probably say things right, but you have Morrow, and Morrow is just like, black is like power, independence, in some ways freedom, and and doing, whatever it takes to kind of attain independence, and then you have the mountain, which symbolizes passion and sometimes a little bit of freedom and like and intensity, and those things. And maybe that's just something I feel like I don't embody in my regular life. And there's aspects that, like, maybe I just want to be more intense and feel strong and feel like I'll do whatever it takes and feel very passionate and like alive and sexy and all these aspects that, like, I don't feel like I portray normally, like, in my day to day. And so maybe that's kind of where I started the Rakdos life. And my first deck was Mardu Sacrifice, or Mardu, what do you call this? Which is red, white, and black. Mardu Aristocrats. That was built by Megan and Maria. I think Maria's. It was like a deck thing that she did for Standard.
Good Luck High Five. Is that?
Yeah, from Good Luck High Five. This was back when I joined. Like, I really got into Magic around the War of the Spark block, or that's block, and she had a deck, and that was my first deck, was Sacrifice. And it was the red and black elements that were like the strongest part of the deck. Like, you had white that was there kind of for filler, but for some reason I just identify Rakdos, and it's the kinkiest guild, like BDSM kinky, fun, circusy, like just having a wild time, and like, the aspects of Rakdos being able to kind of like, you really hope things line up, like more so than most other decks. Like, you really hope like you draw smoothly because you're doing some very powerful things, but you usually just can't get there, and you just hope you kind of get there because, like, you can't control your opponent's top deck, and people will bitch about Rakdos left and right, and you'll still lose lots of your games because they just top deck well. But like, something about that, like, chanciness, that like, and just everything about Rakdos when you play it just embodies it. Like, I feel like there's other decks that, like, you play and it's just like, yeah, that motif, that thing is kind of there, but it's just not so, like, I don't know what it is. It's like something that just grabs my whole entire being and just like claws me in, and I'm just like there for the ride. And I don't know what it is that Rakdos does, how that does it to me, but that's kind of where I operate from.
That's great. I'm sort of in your camp because my favorite I'm just a black mage. Like, I just
hell yeah, exactly.
My favorite card is probably like Dark Confidant, right? Also my favorite flavor text, greatness at any cost. That's what it's all about. It's like sacrificing everything for power, right? And that's obviously not who I am in real life either, but it's just, I love that when I play Magic. I love the black magic. I love death, like, reanimating something, just like, just like almost like killing myself so that I can kill you first. That's what I love.
Yeah. And like, to me, it's like, I'm so messed up, but like, there's like such a romantic feeling I feel about that. Like, I'm fucking myself up so
romantic,
I can kill
man.
you.
There's nothing weird about that.
Yeah.
Maybe
like,
I'm weird too,
like,
so.
Yeah, what's up? This kink BDSM thing is making sense for, like, but that the Rakdos thing of just like, I'm doing everything, I'll hurt myself so I can put you in the dirt, like, if we're gonna take this pain, we're taking it together, but I'll come on the other side of it better, it's just
I love winning the game at 2 life, right? Because you're at 0, but I'm at 2. I love that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, this stuff is just and then when you win as Rakdos, like,
so satisfying.
So satisfying. Like, there's other things like, I'm ramping. Of course you're gonna win. You're gonna ramping. Right. You're not taking much risk. Like, whatever. You're building a bunch of small dudes like Selesnya. You're drawing a bunch of cards as Is It and like casting all these spells and like that's just boring, bro. Like, I'm just trying to like do some demonic shit while I'm playing Magic.
I'm just trying to end you, and that's what I call. Like, how when people are just like building up and ramping, I call that like SimCity Magic. They're just kind of like playing solitaire. And no, I'm just a spike. I just want to kill you. Like, I just want you dead. Like, I don't care what you do on the 6th turn because I want to kill you by the 5th turn, kind of thing. So
exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or just long. Like, Rakdos also does the long drawn out. Like, I'm gonna nickel and dime you, and you're gonna watch me just like. Just chip at you, bro.
There's also the value engine aspect, which is cool.
It's great.
Yeah, so I want to know because you're recently on something which is, you mentioned Post Malone, but for me it would be like if I was able to film with the professor, that would be like right up there, right? Because you're recently on an episode of Shuffle Up and Play. And playing No Ban List Modern, which is I enjoyed that a lot because I play Modern, and I remember Loris very well. And it shows that you have that Modern background. But what was it like to work with Prof? Like kind of guide me through that whole story of how you were like approached to actually literally filming.
Prof is such a kind soul. So like. Prof really, before he invites you onto his show, I mean, he really like wants to make sure he establishes a relationship with you in some form or manner, and he also wants to get to know you, kind of what you do in some senses. But like him, he extrapolates it a little bit further because he's just kind of more that person to like an extent where it's like I wouldn't say it's a flaw, but he's very deeply concerned about someone making sure that he cares about them to an extent where like I'm like, no, hit that person up. Like I talked to him about hitting some person up of like, no, hit them up. I'll co-sign, like I'll do. He's like, no. I want to really make sure. And and so like from that standpoint, like when he works with you, he's like making sure that you're well taken care of. And like by the time he asks you to be on the show, it's like, yeah, sure, why not? Like you're just like you feel like you're the homie with the professor. Not to say like I don't feel like we're homies in some senses, but like he
takes the time to get to know the people, right?
Yeah, and he like establishes a relationship like through DMs or like through Twitter responses and stuff like that. And so when you get to meet him, he's like he's kind of in the same boat as like myself or you, like where he's very personal, he's very insightful, he's very empathetic. And but he also has a show to like do. So like if you ever meet show types in like any content, like but somehow he still gets he slows it down enough to kind of be able to establish rapport and empathy with you. Let's see, he's very charismatic, and like when he I call it like turning off and on. When he's on, it's like, it's great to see, it's awesome to see, but when he's off, it's like, you notice the transition, and it's nice to see, and you're able to, like, talk with him and vibe with him, where I've seen in other industries where, like, that happens, they never turn off, or you don't know when they're off or on, and it's just, like, very jarring. And so the professor has just been awesome. He was awesome to work with, and he made me feel like at home. He, like, also, like, took me to like all these great places, and like Titty Pills, Jesse Robkin and Skyler were there as well, and they're phenomenal. I've been a fan like since Jesse Robkin has been crushing the NRG. I've just been such a huge fan of hers, and like being able to like pick her mind, because like RCQ season was around the corner around the time we were filming, and I was just like, I have access to like, you know, both Jesse Robkin and Skyler like Warfield, and I was just like, yo, like this is wild, and like I was fangirling over them. Like they're brilliant. And
I mean, they're
so,
both
like,
very high level Magic players. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and like I wish I had like, you know, some of their like, give me just at least 15%, bruh. Like give me just 15% of what you got, and I swear I'll be good. Like, and so like just being able to be with those three people over the weekend was just like so, I don't know. It was just like that in some ways. Like I know that you're like, what's your pinnacle of like D&D stuff? I feel like in some senses that was kind of like the pinnacle of like my Magic the Gathering thing, was just being able to be in the same space as like those two wonderful people, both Skyler and Jesse, and then also just be able to shoot content with the professor. It's just like that weekend was magical. It was just really magical.
That's awesome. That's the thing, is like when I watched what comes out of it, right? When I watched the final YouTube video, I can really tell that the guests enjoy being on the show, and it's an authentic thing. It's not I hate to use this like severe term, but it's not fake, right? Like it's genuine. So I feel like there's got to be something there in terms of how the prof just makes you guys feel like, you know, there's a good vibe. Like it feels like every episode has been like good vibes. There hasn't really been a miss. So he must be doing something right. Is what I'm inferring.
He tries very hard to make sure that everyone feels invited and listened to and heard, and you just feel like a fucking human, like when you're around. And like, if you can do that within, that's a big secret to any content creation people fucking out there. Like, if you ever are able to make people feel like a fucking human while they're shooting content, like you can do no fucking wrong. And it just makes for better shit, like just straight up. Like, and I think if you ever just treat other people like human beings while be able to produce content and do it well, like, that's the fucking end goal. Like that's the goal there.
So what's how do you see your content progression, right? Because I feel like you're balancing. By the way, we're kind of segueing here, but how do you see, you know, MTG, D&D? I'm sure you're doing other stuff as well. I'm not sure if you're going to start a computer science YouTube channel, probably not anytime soon, but you know, like, how do you balance your projects? And you've got a podcast now, right? With shout out to with your two wonderful hosts, the one James and
Airball.
So how do you balance everything?
I don't know.
How do you aspire to balance everything, I guess?
You tell me. Honestly, like, content life has been hard, because I like, one thing that it's really been hard to come to terms with is like, my own content is not really, I can't say like, follow me at like, you know, I do say like follow my Twitch and I'll do Twitch content and stuff, but like my own stuff, my own personal stuff, I don't do much there. Like, honestly, a lot of my stuff is guesting and showing up at places. But like, obviously, you know, I have the Faith Forge Academy podcast. I have the podcast with Magic the Gathering with Nuts and Bolts with one James and Airball. I'm about to be into the Motherlands soon here. I think we talked about, I think it's live, or we've said like we're coming back, which is a Twitch like TTRPG thing done for Twitch by Twitch, kind of like a weird, but we're working for Twitch.
So you've always been more of an ensemble cast, maybe is the word, right?
Yeah, I'm like a weird performer contractor. I think that's probably the best way to say what I do. And so I get contracted or show up in stuff, not even contracted, because I don't always get paid, but so balancing that out, I don't know. Like, I just try and assess, like, oh, I'm really interested in Magic, so I'm going to do lots of Magic stuff, but I want to make sure I keep a tab on D&D stuff and have enough stuff going on with D&D. So it's kind of just been, like, a weird figure as I go, like, trying to balance the two, because you don't see much people who are authentically part of both. Or they do, but they don't have one be main-facing, and I'm trying to have both be main-facing all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of hard, because it's, like, in some ways, I know I'm limiting myself, because someone can't be like, oh, that's the Magic the Gathering guy, or that's the D&D guy, or that's the TTRPG guy, or that's a voice actor guy. Like, I'm kind of doing so many things, and I don't have, like, my own channel to kind of talk about these things or have, like, something more front-facing that's just personal within me. So, like, honestly, I don't know how I'm going about it, but the one good thing is like I'm not burning out. So like you see a lot of burnout in content creation and like people losing spoons or their cup not being filled or like committing too hard to things or like just getting disenfranchised with the communities that are in, because like some of these communities can be really toxic and like weird. And so it's like, you know, in some ways, like I prefer this. And I know at some point, like I'm going to be doing my own content, you know, probably definitely when I get out of school, computer science, like the goal probably is to just do my own content on top of all the things I'm already committed to, like what I have now. But
Right.
It's hard to kind of want to do my own stuff when I still have like this big overlying shadow on me, which is computer science. But yeah, so I think I just pick up projects here or there and try and keep my ear open for those things. I'm probably going to be looking for another D&D campaign to join soon, because I think one's about to be ending, other than Into the Motherland. So that's probably what I'm going to be doing. So it's kind of just a balancing act, and I figure out as I go. I don't really have like a formula or something. I try and assess like, oh, have I been slacking a lot in D&D? Okay, let's try and do something. Or if I slack a lot in MTG, let's try and do something. So that's kind of how I've been doing it.
I appreciate that answer, because anyone who claims to have a formula is probably trying to sell you some masterclass as well, or trying to.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's got it quite figured out, and I don't
No.
think I don't think anyone's thing can just be transposed to someone else's and just be like, this is the way you should do it. I don't think there's like one way to do it, right? So
Yeah.
I appreciate your answer, and I also think that to some extent, because I've talked to a lot of creators, right? Maybe being not hyper focused on one thing also helps with not burning out, right? Because you're exposed to a range of things, so you sort of know how to. It sounds like you know how to draw the boundaries with each one. So in a way, that also can be productive or more sustaining to not just be like, I am the guy who does X, right? Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. I think you're onto something there. Definitely, it stymies growth. Like I acknowledge that, like because I'm not particular one part of the thing, it stymies my growth. But at the same time, I know that it's cool in some ways that I do good enough in each of these things: voiceover, Magic the Gathering, D&D, maybe some other things I'll get into, that like people are interested enough to work with me. And so, I guess that's the level I maintain, is that I do enough stuff to be relevant. I think that's my formula. It's like, do enough in the things that you like doing, like content that you like being a part of, to be relevant enough for people to want to work with you. And I think that's the space I find myself in. And I don't burn out. So like, I guess shout out to anyone who needs to hear that. If you've had like decisions about like trying to branch off into something else, like I know Skyler or Warfield, they've been saying that it's been hard to like do Valorant stuff and also do MTG stuff, and like Valorant, like their numbers are taking a hit. And they also do other stuff, but I would say it's kind of worth it in some senses, because then you don't get overwhelmed by like having to kind of hard commit to something. So maybe that's just like it's a different style of doing things.
This is something that I even struggle with, because I've talked to a lot of creators, and honestly speaking, I think humans are not that great at specialization. Like, it's very hard to just find out that someone only does one thing. You know, like,
Yeah.
we all have different interests, right? Like, even people who are specializing in one thing publicly have so many things going on in private, right?
Yeah.
So it's challenging, because also for me, I want to like show that I care about different things. I care about politics. I care about what's happening in the world. I care about magic. I care about interviewing. I care about video games, blah, blah, blah. I like running. But I also realize that in some ways, it's like other humans can't really process everything that you do. So it's like you kind of have to pull some things back, or you kind of have to compartmentalize on the internet, for better or worse. So there's no question here, but I'm just kind of, I feel that struggle as well. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. Like, is it, because I think there's something very nice about just doing things that you enjoy and doing them publicly. But I think there's also like a good thing to just being more calculated and just be like, I'm just going to represent that I do X. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I missed 20 seconds of that, but I picked up basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, no, I think it is nice that I'm able to kind of give as much as I can about myself onto the things I do and the content I do and the stuff I perform in. Because I know this, I actually think about it, know that I have the privilege of doing that and have done well enough in my connections and people care enough. And like, you know, I feel bad that sometimes I don't feel like I connect with everyone like I'd want to, and I don't have the time for that. But like, it's nice to stay relevant in that way. And it's nice that and you're correct. Like in this interview, like we've touched so many things, and like even this isn't enough time to kind of give you the full spectrum of who I am in
because
totality.
Humans are complicated, right? We're all complicated.
Exactly. But I, you know, and not to like toot my own horn or ego boost, but like I've just lived like so much life and just have delved into so many things and always have something to kind of speak into or something going on. And, you know, I appreciate that people like that stuff. Like I'll talk about mental health or BDSM kink stuff or magic, or like I'm getting into drumming now. I have drum lessons I'm going to each week. I'm trying to get into like art, like painting. Like I'm trying to do that too. And like, I don't know where I'm going to go with that, but like, I think I'm really fortunate that people kind of like, I guess my brand is just like constantly growing, constantly like getting into something new. Like, and I like sharing these things about my mental health or like getting into something new because, you know, I hope that it inspires someone else. I also notice the privilege that I have that I get to do that stuff. But yeah, I think I find myself being fortunate, and I think why I do some of that and share that stuff is because I just want people to feel like they have the permission. Sometimes you feel like you don't need the permission, like no one's telling you can't do it, but sometimes you feel like you need the permission to do something that you've kind of had your interest in, or you've had you know, an inkling that you've wanted to do and you just haven't done it because like for some weird reason you don't feel like you've been giving the permission to, like, so like that's the reason I do like rock climbing and snowboarding and skiing. Like that shit was scary, and I'm gonna be doing it this winter, and you know, and
interesting and scary, right? Yeah,
interesting and scary, and I do that because I know there's not a lot of these habits that I have. You don't see people like me doing well or succeeding in those things who look like me, and I want to give people the permission to be like, you can do it. Like I've done it, you can do it. That's very like shallow because like there's obviously like, you know, financial gatekeeping. There's so many things that kind of stop you. But if one of those things stopping you is like your permission or haven't seen someone else do it, that's relatable. Like I'm trying to at least break that part down.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, man, I think this might be a good time to end the conversation.
Okay.
You know, not that you said anything wrong, but it's just like,
no,
I feel
know,
like this is a good time to bookend it. So, Michael,
yeah,
what's the best place for people to find you on the internet,
sure.
or where you would like to be found?
Yeah, everything is basically comes down to my Twitter at Michaelcrits. You can find out when I'm streaming there. You can find all the content I'm probably doing through that. I sometimes will stream on Twitch playing Magic the Gathering or some other game every now and then, but you'll know through my Twitter. I'm trying to get a better Instagram, but Instagram has been touch and go because, yeah, my former relationship, like, you know, I'm trying to navigate that and have to deal with that. So, but yeah, Michaelcrits, basically everything and everywhere. And that's where you can find me. You can find me like on those podcasts that I mentioned, Faith Forge Academy podcast. We have an episode every Friday, and then Nuts and Bolts podcast where we have an episode every week. I think that's generally the content I have coming down the pipeline. Oh, and Into the Motherlands is coming back. I hope we announce it because like our first episode, I think, is not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday. So you can catch me on that. I believe it's on Cypher of Tears channel. But we're probably going to be like front page Twitch again when that happens. So those are generally the places you can catch me. Please hit me up if you ever have any questions or about anything that I've been into and are trying to get into that type of stuff. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Michael, for your time. Thank you, brother. It's been a great conversation, and I wish you all the best, and wish you an excellent evening where you are.
I appreciate you. Thank you. You as well.